Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtarashta Shri Sriman Nrsimha Abhay Charnarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtarashta Shri Sriman Nrsimha Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 19, which is entitled King Prithu's 100 Horse Sacrifices, Text 12. Okay, please repeat. Tamatrir Bhagavan Aikshat. Tamatrir Bhagavan Aikshat. Tvaramanam Vihayasa. Tvaramanam Vihayasa. Amuktam iva pakhandam. Amuktam iva pakhandam. Yo dharme dharma vibramaha. Yo dharme dharma vibramaha. Tamatrir Bhagavan Aikshat. Tvaramanam Vihayasa. Amuktam iva pakhandam. Yo dharme dharma vibramaha. Tamatrir Bhagavan Aikshat. Tvaramanam Vihayasa. Amuktam iva pakhandam. Yo dharme dharma vibramaha. Word for word. Tam, King Indra, Atrihi, the sage Atri, Bhagavan, most powerful, Aikshat, could see. Tvaramanam, moving very hastily. Vihayasa, in outer space. Amuktam, Amuktam iva, like a liberated person. Pakandam, impostor. Yaha, one who. Adharme, in irreligion. Dharma, religion. Vibhramaha, mistaking. Translation, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. When King Indra was taking away the horse, he dressed himself to appear as a liberated person. Actually, this dress was a form of cheating, for it falsely created an impression of religion. When Indra went into outer space in this way, the great sage Atri saw him and understood the whole situation. Purport. The word Pakhanda used in this verse is sometimes pronounced Pashanda. Both of these words indicate an impostor who presents himself as a very religious person, but in actuality is sinful. Indra took up the saffron-colored dress as a way of cheating others. This saffron dress has been misused by many impostors who present themselves as liberated persons or incarnations of God. In this way, people are cheated. As we have mentioned many times, the conditioned soul has a tendency to cheat. Therefore, this quality is also visible in a person like King Indra. It is understood that even King Indra is not liberated from the clutches of material contamination. Thus the words amuktam iva, meaning as if he were liberated, are used. The saffron dress worn by a sannyasi announces to the world that he has renounced all worldly affairs and is simply engaged in the service of the Lord. Such a devotee is actually a sannyasi or liberated person. In Bhagavad Gita 6.1 it is said, Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sasannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha. One who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work. In other words, one who offers the results of his activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually a sannyasi and yogi. Cheating sannyasis and yogis have existed since the time of Prithu Maharaj's sacrifice. This cheating was very foolishly introduced by King Indra. In some ages, such cheating is very prominent, and in other ages, not so prominent. It is the duty of a sannyasi to be very cautious, because as stated by Lord Chaitanya, Sannyasira alpachidra sarvalokagaya. A little spot in a sannyasi's character will be magnified by the public. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 12.51. Therefore, unless one is very sincere and serious, he should not take up the order of sannyas. One should not use this order as a means to cheat the public. It is better not to take up sannyas in this age of Kali, because provocations are very strong in this age. Only a very exalted person advanced in spiritual understanding should attempt to take up sannyas. One should not adopt this order as a means of livelihood or for some material purpose. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanitansha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Neena Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vansha Kalpatarubhasya Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When you're reading and studying Srila Prabhupada's purports, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll come across certain purports which stick to you. Even after you finish reading the whole Bhagavatam, you read it multiple times, and you go off and someone's giving a class or you're discussing with someone and certain purports will just come to your mind, they'll just click. So this purport is like that. So I remember reading this many years back actually. It's a very relevant purport. One other purport like that, to give an example which sticks out, is the purport that Srila Prabhupada gives towards the end of the 4th canto Srimad Bhagavatam in Dhruva Maharaj's pastimes, where he explains that by the intense austerities performed by Dhruva Maharaj, his mother, who was related to him, got the benefit, and she also went back home, back to Godhead, right? By his being a devotee. And then Srila Prabhupada very famously there, in great humility, says that I would be lucky, to paraphrase, I would be lucky if I could train up at least one disciple of mine to be a pure devotee. And by the strength of their austerities and determination in Krishna consciousness, I may also have an opportunity to go back to home, back to God, Srila Prabhupada says. So purports like that are very deep, and they're Srila Prabhupada's devotional ecstasy. So this is another purport like that, because it's very relevant to all of us in ISKCON, as Vaishnavas, as aspiring Vaishnavas, regardless of our ashram, because this purport is, Srila Prabhupada is reinforcing, telling us, instructing us that we need to be sensitive as to how others perceive us as Vaishnavas, especially those practicing Krishna consciousness. Like if you take people practicing other types of faiths, and if they do something sinful, if they do something unethical or wrong, like Srila Prabhupada often says that certain groups of people in other faiths, they're opening slaughterhouses and performing all sorts of sinful activities, smoking, drinking, this, that. We wouldn't point it out so much. But if a devotee walks down the road and does something in public which is, not right, then everyone would take notice, right? If you go around wearing a sari or a dhoti kurta and you do something wrong, then everyone will take notice, because people understand, or people are aware of our standard as well. And if you perform an act contrary to that, then it's very evident. That's why Srila Prabhupada here is quoting this verse by Lord Chaitanya himself. Where is that verse? Yeah, here we go. It is the duty of a sannyasi to be very cautious, because as stated by Lord Chaitanya, sannyasira alpachidra sarva loka gaya. A little spot in a sannyasi's character will be magnified by the public. So a sannyasi is the emblem of knowledge, the emblem of purity. In any Vedic society, you can just imagine like a pure white silk cloth, right? Spotless, but then you put a little spot of ink on it, right? So your whole attention will just go to that spot of ink, and you completely miss the rest of the white cloth, right? So devotees, and specifically this verse is talking about people in the saffron order. My Guru Maharaj says the saffron sect. Those in the saffron sect, they're under scrutiny, and rightly so as well. So we should not be like Indra. Indra has a very responsible position. He's the king of the demigods, right? A very respectable position. But for the sake of maintaining his sense gratification, for the sake of maintaining his position, he acts in unscrupulous ways, right? In ways that he should not be acting. As Krishna says, yad yad acharati shreshtas tat tat evetaro jana. So the demigods, they can say, hey, we can also act like Indra because our king is acting like that. So it's wrong on Indra's part to keep on time and again acting in ways which are not befitting his stature. My Guru Maharaj was mentioning in a Bhagavatam lecture a point that Gaur Nitai, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they had, not always, but sometimes they had very different methods of preaching. As we know, Lord Chaitanya, he usually preached to people who are up in the high echelons of society, like high brahmanas or high-class sannyasis, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Prakashananda Saraswati, like that. The Qazi, right? The Qazi, so people who are very prominent, eminent in society. Whereas Nityananda Prabhu, he was more of an avadut. He didn't follow social norms and customs. He would just run into pubs and brothels and just roll on the floor like a madman, and people would say, "Get out of here, what are you doing? You're ruining our business." He would say, "No, until you chant the name of Krishna, I'm not doing anything, I'm not getting out." So very unconventional ways of preaching Nityananda Prabhu had. Now, both of these ways are very effective, but Guru Maharaj was mentioning the point that Srila Prabhupada, he wanted us to more preach in the way that Mahaprabhu was preaching, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, to my point earlier, he was sensitive to how other people perceived him. He is of course Sannyas Shiromani, which means the crest jewel of all sannyasis. So he has a duty to maintain a proper reputation amongst the public, right? Two examples that come to my mind. One is obviously Chota Haridas. We have a picture of Chota Haridas just right here. You can see that. I always used to think that's an angel. So that's actually Chota Haridas. So he is, and that's at the beach near Jagannath Puri. So he was an associate of Mahaprabhu. He was in the renounced order of life, and one day he went to beg some food for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He went to beg some rice, just a small handful of rice, and he knocked on the door, and the lady she was an old lady, elderly lady. And when Mahaprabhu found out that someone in the renounced order of life was associating, even for the sake of just begging some rice, Mahaprabhu banished Chota Haridas from his association. Of course, this is Leela, and he has to set some standards, because Mahaprabhu knows in Kali Yuga, people in the renounced order would take that as an opportunity to unrestrictedly mix with the opposite sex. So Chota Haridas Thakur is an extreme example, but it shows how we should act very chastely to our ashrams as well. So he went and begged some food. Mahaprabhu banished him from his association, and Chota Haridas Thakur, he couldn't bear separation from Mahaprabhu, so he commits suicide. He actually ends up committing suicide. And obviously he still has the shelter and protection in the mercy of Mahaprabhu, so he immediately takes up a spiritual form. So that, what you can see is actually the spiritual form of Chota Haridas. And it's mentioned, so that's a spiritual body. He's not an angel. He's not some demigod or something like that. So it's mentioned that he would continue serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by singing and playing musical instruments as Mahaprabhu, when Mahaprabhu was in Jagannath Puri. So this is Chota Haridas. So that's one example, very extreme example that Chaitanya Charitamrita presents. Another example that comes to my mind is when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to go to Vrindavan. As he left Navadvip and he was walking towards this, after he takes sannyas, he's walking towards Vrindavan. All of a sudden, thousands and thousands of people start to follow him because they can't bear separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. You can just imagine one sannyasi walking, thousands of people behind him. They're all going to Vrindavan. Mahaprabhu stops, turns around, and he says, no, this is not how someone should go to Vrindavan. You should not go with a big crowd, a big fanfare like that. Vrindavan is a very sacred, very holy place. It's a place where we do our bhajan, worship Krishna. So we should just go just with a few handful of devotees, just very close associates. So then I think it's Mahaprabhu chooses, or the devotees there, they choose, I think it's Balabhadra Bhattacharya, is that correct? To go to Vrindavan? So Balabhadra Bhattacharya, he goes along with Mahaprabhu there in Vrindavan. So two examples. which show that Mahaprabhu was very sensitive to how the public perceived him in practicing Krishna consciousness. Now here specifically it's talking about the saffron sect, the saffron order, the saffron cloth. Prabhupada mentions it a few times in the purport. Does anyone know what the color saffron represents when sadhus wear it? Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's true, that's correct. Any other, there's a slight bit of detail there as well. Anyone else? No? Okay, so Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Maharaj, when he was here, again, a long time back, we were all new devotees that time, and one day he was giving Srimad Bhagavatam class, and he asked the question, so does anyone know what the saffron color means? And none of us knew, so then he explained. He explained that we have the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and they have three colors which are associated with them as well. Generally, it's mentioned the mode of goodness is represented by the color white. The mode of ignorance, tamas, darkness, is represented by black. And what color is the mode of passion represented by? Red, exactly. So red or saffron. That is the color which is represented by the mode of passion. So generally, passion is characterized by lust, the desire to work very hard to then enjoy your senses. So lust is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as the eternal enemy of the soul, and the hiding places of the lust are the mind, the intelligence, and one's senses. So lust is an eternal enemy of the soul which is hiding within us. It's within us. Now when someone in the renounced order of life wears the color saffron or the color red outside of their body, it signifies, Maharaj was explaining, it signifies that lust no longer is there within them. They've taken it outside of their body. All right, so this is one example that Maharaj said. So the passion is no longer there inside, but they've renounced it and they've chucked it outside, basically. But yes, to your point also, Ayush Prabhu, it also means it represents the fire of devotional service as well. So, but this is the definition that we heard from Maharaj back then. So here we see King Indra, the king of the demigods, is essentially cheating. Prabhupada opens the purport by saying that he's a Pakhanda, wow, which means atheist. So Indra is an atheist. He's the king of demigods, king of Suras, one of the sons of Aditi, the mother of the demigods, the chief demigods, and Prabhupada is calling him a Pashanda or a Pakhanda, which means an imposter who presents himself as very religious but is actually very sinful. Prabhupada also has another go at Indra in another part. Of course, we respect Indra. It's by his mercy he acts in these ways to teach us. But in the 6th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, I think I was explaining some weeks back that he's fighting with the great demon Vritrasura, right, who was previously King Chitraketu. Vritrasura is the chief of the demons, and King Indra is the chief of the demigods. But the Indra's reason in trying to kill Vritrasura is so that he can maintain his opulence in the kingdom of heaven. Vritrasura's reason for fighting with Indra is simply out of a merit of duty, and he actually wants to die because he knows that after he dies in Krishna consciousness, he's going back to Godhead. So there, Srila Prabhupada, again, in a very famous purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that although Indra is the great Sura, the great demigod, here he is actually acting like a demon by his actions. And Vritrasura, although externally a demon, he's instructing Indra in transcendental knowledge, and he's telling Indra, go ahead and kill me. Go ahead and kill me with the thunderbolt weapon created from Dadichi's bones, because once you kill me, I'm going to die in full Krishna consciousness. I'm going to go back to Godhead. So the demon externally is actually a devotee within. Right? So there's another instance in the Shastra. Like here we see that Indra is creating a mistaken situation by wearing the saffron cloth, right? So that situation is also there in the Ramayana as well. Yeah? We know that Ravana, he teamed up with the demon Marich, and he wanted to kidnap Sita. So he instructed Marich to go into the forest in the form of a very beautiful deer. So he shape-shifted himself, and he came in as this deer, and it's explained this deer is like, in Ramayana, it's this deer is also explained how beautiful this deer was. It was sapphire. Its tail was like a rainbow. Its horns were blue. Its eyes were like crystals and pearls. So very out of this world type of deer. Like, who wouldn't be attracted to some creature like that, right? And on top of that, the deer was prancing and frolicking around. And you know how little baby calves, right? Little baby elephants are like that. Just by looking at their movements, you get attracted. So this deer was like that. And Sita got attracted. And she asked Ram to please get the deer. I want this deer as my pet. And Lakshman knew that, hey, something's not right here. Probably this deer is a demon. And maybe it's Maricha. He's up to his tricks. So he warned Lord Ramchandra. And Ramchandra said, look, if it is Maricha, I'll still go out and hunt the deer. At least Maricha will die. But if it's not Maricha, if it's actually a deer, then I can get a pet for Sita. So then Ramchandra goes off to this deer. And as it happens, is they go quite far. They cut quite a far distance. And then Ramchandra finds out that it's actually a demon. And there's a fight there. Maricha tries to evade the arrow of Lord Ramchandra. But he can't, and he actually dies. So Ramchandra kills Maricha. And he converts back into the demon body from the deer. But before he's dying, he yells out in the voice of Lord Ram, saying, please help me, please help me. So meanwhile, back there where Sita is there with Lakshman, because he's protecting her. And in some versions of the Ramayana, it said that Lakshman actually draws like a Lakshman Rekha. But I don't think that's there in Valmiki's Ramayana. So Sita, hearing the cries of so-called Lord Ramchandra, starts to chastise Lakshman, saying that, you should go and see what's happening to my husband. Why are you just staying here? She goes pretty heavy. I don't want to say exactly what Mother Sita says, but she basically really hurts the ego of Lakshman to the point where he doesn't want to leave his position of protecting Sita, but Sita sort of forces him to leave. And then he goes after Lord Ramchandra in the forest to see what's the matter. That's when Ravana appears dressed in saffron cloth as a demon. Right? And he has Rudraksha beads and matted hair, and he comes in the saffron cloth. And it's mentioned that it's such a scary situation when Ravana is approaching. It's mentioned in Ramayana that the trees stop their movements, everything is still, the rivers stop flowing, the birds in the forest, seeing that Ravana is approaching, because they're all fearful, right? They stop making their noises. Everything is like very, very silent, and Ravana is approaching Sita. And then he starts to glorify Sita, and he tells her, what are you doing here in this forest? You should come with me. I have a great city there. And then there's an argument between Sita and Ravana. And Sita says, you are like iron. Ramchandra is like gold. You're like the pathetic winter season. Ramchandra is like the beautiful spring season. There's all these arguments. And then that's when Ravana comes and basically kidnaps Sita. And thus begins the end. The beginning of the end of Ravana when he does that. Of course, he never took Sita, the spiritual potency of the Supreme Personality of God. He essentially took Maya Devi, with him. And Radhanath Maharaj, he makes a very interesting point there. In Ramchandra's battle with Ravana, right? Ravana had 10 heads, right? And whenever one of his heads would get destroyed, what would happen? Another head would come up, right? Another head would grow. So these 10 heads, Radhanath Maharaj was explaining, they represent our material desires. And whenever one tries to satisfy one's material desires, in the vain attempt of actually trying to become fulfilled, what happens? Another material desire comes in its place. And not just one head. Many heads will grow after that. Because it's like that. It's like a seed. You're planting numerous seeds by fulfilling a material desire. Krishna says, Dushpurena analena cha. He says in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that fulfilling the fire of lust, like we're talking about the fire of devotional service, so there's also bhavagni as well. There's also the fire of this material world, which is the fire of lust. And Krishna says in the Gita, this fire is never ever extinguished. It's never ever fulfilled. It's never you keep adding, you keep fulfilling your material desires, you're just adding fuel to that fire, and the fire just keeps raging and raging. So the only way to destroy this enemy of lust, Radhanath Maharaj mentions, finally at the end, Ramchandra, he got his arrow and he pierced Ravana's heart. So it's only when the Supreme Personality of Godhead goes within us, inside our heart, and replaces the position of lust which is there, then we can combat lust. So as Krishna says in the Gita, that you can't overcome Maya, she's my energy, right? But only by surrendering unto me, by taking shelter of me, can Maya be destroyed. So here we see Srila Prabhupada is quoting Bhagavad Gita 6.1, Anashrita karma phalam karyam karma karotiya sasanyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriya. Two types of false renunciates Srila Prabhupada is sort of hammering in this purport. The first type we just discussed. The first type is those who are pakandas, who externally they may present themselves as sadhus, but internally they're engaged in all sorts of nonsense activity. That's one. The second type of so-called sadhus or renunciates that Srila Prabhupada is condemning in this purport is those who have taken to the renounced road of life, but they still remain selfish. They're not extending themselves. They just, do their impersonalistic meditation. That's why he's quoting 6.1 of the Bhagavad Gita, which says that one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated, that means even one who is a renounced, they should still work as they're obligated in the renounced road of life. Such a person is a true mystic, not one who lights no fire and performs no work. Again, I mention Gita 18.5, which says, Yagya dan tapa karma na tyajam karyam evatat yagya dan tapa chaiva pavanani manishinam. Krishna says, three things must never be given up, even by those who are liberated persons. What to speak of people who are in the renounced road of life? Yagya, dan, and tapa. In other words, sacrifice, charity, and austerity. These three things should never be given up. And I'll just mention something, I'll just read something from that purport, from the 18th chapter, what Srila Prabhupada mentions. Because you would think that if Yagya Dan Tapa is something material, I should give it up. For example, if I'm performing some karma kanda sacrifice, it should be given up. Or if I'm doing dan, if I'm doing charity to get something in return, right? It should be given up. Yes, it should be given up. But what the impersonalists don't understand is that Yagya, Dan, and Tapa can be engaged, it can be connected with Krishna. And because it's connected with Krishna, one doesn't need to give it up. And just listen to this, what Srila Prabhupada is saying. He's saying, there are many purificatory processes for advancing a human being to spiritual life. And he's talking about the marriage ceremony. The marriage ceremony, for example, is considered to be one of these sacrifices. What is the marriage sacrifice called in Sanskrit? Any idea? Vivaha yagya. So marriage is a sacrifice. It's not just a samskar, it's not just something that you do. It's a sacrifice, right? So it's called Vivaha yagya, the marriage sacrifice. Should a sannyasi who is in the renounced order of life and who has given up his family relations encourage the marriage ceremony? Because Srila Prabhupada was sometimes criticized that he's a sannyasi, he's given up all material responsibilities. Still, why is he engaged in wedding his disciples? He should not be engaged in such stuff. So that's why Srila Prabhupada is writing this purport. Srila Prabhupada is saying, the Lord says here that any sacrifice which is meant for human welfare should never be given up. Vivaha Yagya, the marriage ceremony, is meant to regulate the human mind so that it may become peaceful for spiritual advancement. So you see, marriage has a spiritual purpose as well. It's meant to regulate two people coming together. They regulate their minds in their ashram so that they're peaceful now to be able to prosecute Krishna consciousness. For most men, this Vivaha Yagya should be encouraged even by persons in the renounced order of life. Sannyasis should never associate with women, but that does not mean that one who is in the lower stages of life, a young man, should not accept a wife in a marriage ceremony. So, to show that even something seemingly material, such as marriage, can be dovetailed in Krishna consciousness, and even those who are in the renounced order of life should still encourage that as well. So for us as devotees in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, what is the yagya, dana and tapa that we're doing? What is the yagya that we're doing? Yeah, Sankirtan yagya. What is the dan that we are giving? Krishna consciousness. Yeah, more specifically, we're giving transcendental knowledge, right? So my spiritual master, he mentions that we're giving charity of books to people, right? And we're giving them brains, basically. We're distributing brains, he was mentioning in the class. We're distributing brains to people. So we're distributing transcendental knowledge, and that's what has been going on since time immemorial. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarsayo vidu. And then in the beginning verse of the 4th chapter, Krishna is saying, I first gave this knowledge, right, to the sun god, who gave it to Manu, who gave it to Ikshvaku. So Krishna is distributing knowledge. All of his acharyas in the disciplic succession distributing knowledge. So we are also distributing knowledge. That is our dan. That is our charity, to give people transcendental knowledge. That is the greatest charity. And tapasya. Yeah. Were you there yesterday in Namamrita? I think someone was reading the Namamrita. That's what Srila Prabhupada was saying. That the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra becomes effective when one follows the 4 regulated principles. So he was saying that in Namamrita yesterday morning, Prabhupada was saying that in this day and age, it's not possible for someone to just take water and fast for months on end, how people used to do back in the day. But in this day and age, at least we should follow the 4 regulated principles. And Srila Prabhupada is saying by doing that, then our chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra becomes very powerful, right? So tapasya as well. And there's other types of tapasya as well, like Ekadashi fasting and so many other types of tapasya that we do in Krishna consciousness. So we've spoken about bad examples. I wanted to just talk about a good example as well. So who else better in terms of renunciates than the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, right? They are also the crest jewels of sannyasis. So the famous bhajan by Srinivasa Acharya is the Sad Goswami Ashtakam. This was one of Srila Prabhupada's favorite bhajans as well. If you hear that particular recording of that bhajan that Srila Prabhupada sang, it has a very nostalgic feeling, right? It has a very nostalgic mood to it, a very deep mood to it. So if you haven't heard it, please hear that bhajan sung by Srila Prabhupada. So I just want to mention 9 points. I'm not sure how much in detail I can go because of the time, but I'll mention 9 points from that bhajan which demonstrate or give an example to us how someone in the renounced order should act. Okay? So the first point is Krishnot Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro. Okay, maybe most of you have heard that line before. Krishnot Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro. Yeah. So those who are in the renounced order of life, and by the way, just before getting into this, reason I'm speaking from this bhajan is because, again, I quote my Guru Maharaj, he was having a class with the brahmacharis in New Zealand, and he was saying that this bhajan is the anthem for those who are in the renounced order of life. It is the anthem. So I remember when we used to go on traveling Sankirtan, whole day we would distribute books, and after the whole day of book distribution, we would come back, have a kirtan, and we would sing this bhajan every day. And we would read and meditate on the translation as well. It's very important. So first quality of someone in the renounced order of life is Krishnot Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro. Engaged in chanting the holy name and dancing as well. So Ayana Prabhu was making a point, I remember a long time back, hearing that it says Krishna Ut Kirtan. So Ut before Kirtan means 2 things. It means loudly chanting. Right? Ut Kirtan means loud chanting, not just chanting, but loud chanting. And Ut Kirtan also means Uttishta, which means stand up. Don't just sit down. Right? We have to, Mahaprabhu's teaching of Harinam Sankirtan is to stand up, to go out, and to dance and chant. Right? This is the Yuga Dharma, Harinam Sankirtan, Krishnot Kirtana. So those in the renounced order of life are engaged in Krishnot Kirtana, loudly chanting the holy name and dancing as well. Second quality, Dhira Dhira Janapriyo. The 6 Goswamis were non-envious. They had no jealousy, they had no envy, and therefore they were popular with both the ruffians, in other words, the thugs and the no goods of society, as well as the gentle people in society, as well as the civilized people. No one could find any fault with them. So envy and jealousy, there's a slight difference. Envy means that someone else is better than you, right? And you want to become like them, basically. So if we could say that you're you feel like you're in an inferior position, someone else is in a superior position, that may be because of their skill or talent or position, whatever. You feel envious of them because they're in a high position. That's envy. Jealousy means that you already have something, you already have some talent, but then you see someone who is supposedly in an inferior position to you rising up and coming to your level. That's jealousy. So there's a slight difference, but similar sort of anartha. So the 6 Goswamis were free from envy and jealousy. Point number 3, Lokanam Hitakarino. They were engaged in delivering the conditioned souls. There's a famous verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita where Mahaprabhu meets with the Kurma Brahmana. And there he says, Amara Agnya Guru Hai Tare Desh. He says, on my instruction, become Guru. Stay where you are. Practice Krishna consciousness. Spread Krishna consciousness. Stay where you are in your situation. Follow my instructions. And Mahaprabhu says, by doing this in the near future, you will very soon have my association. Very soon have my association. So those who are followers of Mahaprabhu, they're engaged in the primary responsibility of delivering the conditioned souls. Of course, that also means that we have to deliver ourselves, because Srila Prabhupada said, saving oneself and saving others is not mutually exclusive. Say the very fact that you're saving someone else from Maya means that you should first of all be out of Maya. So Srila Prabhupada would quote the verse from the Bible, physician, heal thyself, or doctor, heal thyself. The doctor is engaged in healing others, but the doctor has to be fit and healthy first. Yeah. Point number 4, Nana Shastra Vichara Naika Nipino, which means those in the renounced order of life should scrutinizingly study the Shastra. Right? So our acharyas mentioned that it doesn't matter about your ashram, doesn't matter about your varna, anything like this, but one who is conversant in the science of Krishna, that person is fit to become a spiritual master. So again, the accumulation of transcendental knowledge, studying the Shastra for ourselves, contemplating and applying, as well as sharing with others, is an essential quality for those in the renounced order of life. And by the way, that means all of us. The renounced order of life in bhakti doesn't just mean those who are wearing saffron cloth, it means all of us, because all of us have said no to Maya and yes to Krishna. Right? So we're all renounced. 5th quality, Papo Tapa Nikrintano. Those in the renounced order of life are sinless, and because they're sinless, they deliver others from sin. So not like how Srila Prabhupada is saying here, that pakanda, they're wearing saffron cloth, but they're pakandas. Externally, they're showing themselves to be sadhus, but inside they're sinful. So being sinless is another quality of a sannyasi. Quality number 6, Tyaktva Turnam Ashesha Mandalapati. The Goswamis, they renounced association of all sort of mandalapatis, all sort of like kings and royal people, and they were fully detached. Vairagya. Everyone knows what that word means, Vairagya? So there's Vairagya, I remember Ganesham was saying, there's Vairagya, and then there's Yukta Vairagya as well. The more powerful one is actually Yukta Vairagya, because Vairagya actually doesn't mean much, right? Vairagya or detachment doesn't mean much, because like I can't say that I should be detached from, let's say, my car. If I had a car, I can't say, there's no value in me saying that I renounce my car, because actually the car doesn't belong to me, right? The materials in which the car is built from, I don't own those materials. I didn't create those materials. So there's no point in saying that you're renounced from something because actually nothing belongs to you in the first place. So real renunciation is yukta vairagya. Understanding, Rupa Goswami says this as well in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that understanding that everything has a relationship with Krishna and therefore everything should be engaged in Krishna's service. And he defines this as yukta vairagya. So that is the actual renunciation of someone in the round sort of life. 7. Nidrahara viharakari vijito. Those who are yogis in the renounced sort of life, bhakti yogis, they have conquered over eating and sleeping. In other words, they've conquered their senses. So eating means not eating atyar, not eating more than is required to maintain body and soul together. And Srila Prabhupada defines what that is. You have all heard of this thing called mitahar. Mitahar is, or mitabhuk, is one of the 26 qualities of a Vaishnava mentioned by Mahaprabhu in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada explains that in detail. He says, if you are hungry, don't eat up to your neck because it will interfere in your devotional service. Unless, as Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, unless it's a Vyas Puja. If it's a Vyas Puja and you don't eat up to your neck, it's an offense. All right? So, but generally speaking, if you're hungry, Srila Prabhupada says that you should fill only half your stomach with food. Half. That means you should not eat. To maintain proper health, you should only eat so you satisfy half your hunger at any time. And then a quarter of your stomach you should fill with liquids, and the remaining quarter, Srila Prabhupada says, you should leave free for proper circulation of air. Right? So this is mitahar. And then Srila Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna, in terms of sleeping now, coming to sleeping, Arjuna was Gudakesh, which means that he had conquered over ignorance and he had conquered over sleep as well. And Srila Prabhupada says, how do we conquer over sleep? 2 instances, 2 examples Srila Prabhupada gives. One is that we have to develop a very close relationship with Krishna. The closer we get to Krishna, the more we'll come out of the mode of ignorance, and the more naturally, physically, we'll have to sleep less. Our bodily necessities will decrease. But another example he gives, I think this is in his Bhagavatam purport, Srila Prabhupada says, if you want to give up sleep, then you have to cry for Krishna. Because if you're crying, then you're not going to fall asleep. Have you ever tried, maybe you've been chanting japa and you feel sleepy, then you can try this next time. Just get a little bit of water on your fingers and just put a little bit of water, just a little bit. And immediately your sleep will go. At least for the next 5-10 minutes until the water's there, until it doesn't evaporate. It looks like some people have tried it here. Right? So the water will get rid of your sleepiness. So Prabhupada says if you want to conquer over sleep, then cry for Krishna. And then devotees say, what if I can't cry for Krishna? Then devotees reply back, then cry because you can't cry for Krishna. What if you can't cry because you can't cry for Krishna? Then cry because you can't cry because you can't cry for Krishna. So we have to come to that level. Quality number 8, Radha Kunda Tate Kalinda Tanaya. The devotees, they take shelter of the Dham, the holy Dham. For us in ISKCON, it's a multinational spiritual organization. We don't always have the luxury of staying in the Dham, living in the Dham. So Srila Prabhupada has said that his temples are spiritual embassies, right? That means this temple is non-different from Golok Vrindavan. And Prabhupada made that comment in a lecture when he was lecturing in Melbourne. He said that this Melbourne Mahaprabhu Mandir is Vaikuntha. Then he said, actually it's not Vaikuntha, it's Golok Vrindavan. Right? So by coming to the temple, taking shelter of Radha Gopinath's temple, we are taking shelter of Vrindavan, the Dham. And lastly, Radha Krishna Guna Smriter Madhurima. They're absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Pratikshana Sva Vande Guroshi Charanaravana. So one of the qualities of the spiritual master is pratikshana. Kshana means like a moment. Pratikshana means at every moment the spiritual master is absorbed in Krishna consciousness. I'm making the point that those in the renounced order of life should work, right? And I just want to quickly read something, and I'll finish with 3 quick stories which impelled devotees into action in Krishna consciousness. I just want to quickly read something before I get into that. This is from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrit, and this is when Srila Prabhupada, this was in the late 1970s, like 1976, 77. Srila Prabhupada's health was decreasing, and Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and devotees in Mumbai, they were calling him to come because the temple was, about to be open and stuff like that. So it says here in the Leelamrit, Srila Prabhupada's plans were to move to Bombay from Vrindavan. Tamal Krishna Goswami said a lot of senior devotees were gathering in Bombay. They had gone there from Vrindavan and were waiting for Srila Prabhupada, right? So Srila Prabhupada's in Vrindavan, and now devotees are saying, Prabhupada, come to Bombay, even though Prabhupada's health is not good. And then Prabhupada says, I am therefore going, said Srila Prabhupada. In spite of so much inconveniences, I am going there. You want to stay in Bombay? Asked Tamal Krishna. How long? I don't want to stay anywhere, said Srila Prabhupada. I want to work. I have stayed in big palaces, big cities. I have no other desire but to work. How long do you want to work in Bombay? Asked Tamal Krishna. So long as there is work, said Srila Prabhupada. There is no end to it. Our Bombay should be organized. Work is our life. There is no question of how long as possible. So the sannyasis, Prabhupada's disciples in our movement, they're very steadfastly following Srila Prabhupada's example. Even in their mid-70s now, they're still traveling, right? Still traveling, often by themselves, without any personal servants, anyone to assist them, and still preaching Krishna consciousness with great vigor. So quickly, I'll tell 3 quick stories. One is the story of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was in the Jaladuta, and it was a 35-day journey from India to Boston. And on the 13th day, Srila Prabhupada had a heart attack, and he was a bit devastated. He was like, okay, so what's going to happen? Am I even going to make it to America? And it's mentioned in the Jaladuta diaries of Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada actually didn't write this down, but he later revealed this instance, this dream that he had, to his devotees later on when ISKCON was established. Prabhupada said, when I had that heart attack on the 13th day on the Jaladuta, while the boat was in the Arabian Sea, then I went to sleep that night and I had a vision. And I had a dream. And I saw that I was in this very big open boat, and Krishna was at the head of the boat, and he was pulling that boat with a rope. And on the sides of the boat were all of Krishna's incarnations, Parshuram, Kalki, Buddha, right, Varahadev. They're all there on the side of this boat, and they're all pushing that boat towards America. And I was sitting on that boat, and Krishna was looking straight at me, and he was saying, don't worry, don't fear. I'm guiding this boat, and you will make it to America, and you'll be successful. Srila Prabhupada took that dream, that instance, as an example to motivate him further into more action, more steadfast action to Krishna consciousness. Even though, materially speaking, he was in a very devastating situation. He just had a heart attack that day. This is a less well-known story of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This is, I'm not sure if this happened in Navadvip, in Mayapur side. So, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, he had recently left this world. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur had also left this world. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was devastated. He was upset, like, these 2 great souls who are my guides and instructors, they've left. My father, my spiritual teacher, they've left. How can I be successful in spreading Krishna consciousness? I've been instructed to spread this movement. How can I be successful? He was in the middle of writing his commentary on the Upadeshamrita. How many verses does the Upadeshamrita have? Nectar of Instruction? Anyone know? 11 verses. Had 11 verses. And he was in the middle of writing his commentaries on the 8th verse. And he just dropped his pen and he just left it. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. And then that night, he has a dream. He sees that from the distance, Mahaprabhu is dancing through the fields of Mayapur. And he's dancing towards the Yoga Pit in Mayapur. And following Mahaprabhu, just behind him, are the remaining members of the Panchatattva. And they're also dancing as well. And it's a loud, ecstatic kirtan. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he can hear all this. And he can see all this. And then behind the Panchatattva, the 6 Goswamis were dancing as well. They were following. And then our acharyas, like Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivas Acharya and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, they were also there. And then finally at the end, he saw Gaur Kishodas Babaji Maharaj, and he saw Bhaktivinoda Thakur at the end. And he was also following Mahaprabhu in the kirtan as well. And Mahaprabhu comes up to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and he says, don't worry. You continue preaching this movement of Gaur Nam and Gaur Kam. Kam means work. I'm not saying Kam as in lust Kam, but Kam here means work. So do Gaur Kam, the work of Lord Chaitanya, and spread Gaur Nam. Gaur Nam and Gaur Kam. And you'll be successful. So this was a catalyst for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to push forward and be successful, to do work. And I'll give one last example. This is an example which I heard from Ayendra Prabhu as well. He had joined a temple, I think it was in maybe Washington, D.C. in America. He was a fresh brahmachari. And he was just 1 week, his first week in the temple, staying in the brahmachari ashram. And that first week, his service was just Harinam Sankirtan. So he was doing, I don't know, I think he says something like 15 hours of Harinam Sankirtan every single day he was doing. And he mentions that one night, at the end of that week, he went to sleep on the floor in the ashram. And as he was drifting off to sleep, his eyes weren't fully closed yet, but he was in that semi-lucid state, like that lucid state. And then all of a sudden, he hears bells. And he hears like a stampede noise. And he starts to see a whole herd of cows coming towards him. So he explains that he's actually sleeping, and he's looking up, and above him, he explains it's like a glass ceiling, like 4 feet above him. This is what he explains his dreams. A glass ceiling. And he's seeing these cows just walking above him on this glass ceiling. And the dust is being raised. And then he starts to hear all these young boys laughing and giggling. And then from a distance, he starts to see like a whole herd of cowherd boys coming. And they're dancing with these cows. And the whole procession is passing by. Right? And everyone is playing flutes. And he's saying that I can hear bugle sounds and everything like that. And then finally at the end, Krishna and Balaram, they come. And they walk above him. And he says that Krishna stops. He looks down at him. And Krishna looks directly into his eyes and smiles at him. And he says that was the changing point and in his Krishna consciousness life. Just 1 week into Krishna consciousness. And he says, when I got that dream, when I experienced that, it wasn't any ordinary dream that I'd experienced before. It was completely supernatural, completely transcendental. And he says, I made a resolve from that day onwards that I would never ever leave the lotus feet of Krishna. And we can see what he achieved in life. And just sitting in that one corner in Krishna Balaram temple and just singing for Krishna, how his legacy has spread throughout the world and continues to spread, even more than 10 years after he has left. So it's the power of working for Krishna with purity, not like what Indra is doing in this verse. We're over time, we'll finish it. Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai.